All right, hey guys, this is Spilo. This is going to be the second episode of our First Fights concept series. Again, just giving a quick rundown of what this means. We're going to analyze the very first fight in an Overwatch League matchup and try and not just analyze the fight, but also pull a concept that we can take from how the fight goes down and then apply it and explain what the concept is and how we can apply it in our own comp games and our own understanding of the game. So we're going to go over the Vancouver Titans versus the Los Angeles Valiant, the third game, the game where the Titans cement their win over the Valiant. And we're going to talk about a concept in this fight, not just about how it relates to the compositions that were played, but also in like the concept as a whole. And the concept we're going to go over is poke versus point. And this is a crucial concept, maybe even more important than the week before last concept, because poke versus point is the question that you ask yourself when you play a composition, whether it's in comp, scrims, whether you're watching an Overwatch League game and trying to decide how it should be played. Poke versus point asks, what team does better the longer the fight draws out before the fight actually starts? In other words, if we set each other like 15, 20 meters apart, right, and just press our buttons at each other without actually doing anything, right, what team is going to win? What team has the better damage at range, right? What team is going to do well in staging, like preparing for the fight? And what team is going to do well once their plan is actually executed. Now, playing for poke is playing for damage, right? Let's say you have a Widowmaker, you have a Junkrat, you have a hard Orisa shield. If you sit there and you just tickle each other, you're going to win. You're going to build your Riptide. You have Junkrat who's great at range, like spamming out the damage. The Widow's got great range damage. You have the hard shield that's never going to break until they go through it. And so you're obviously going to win there, right? Whereas a composition like a dive composition, Genji, Tracer, Winston, D.Va, Zenyatta, Lucio, not a lot of healing, not a lot of damage, but a great play, right? So you either need to be playing for poke, you need to be playing for point, or you need to be playing for play. That's the third option. So where you're executing a setup and then completing that setup. A lot of times, if you're playing like a GOATS composition, that is revolving around the objective. So taking as little damage as possible and then killing whatever's close because you don't have a lot of damage. You don't have a lot of poke damage, so that's your weakness. Sometimes, like I said, with dive, it's about avoiding damage because you don't have a hard shield, you don't want to waste matrix, you don't have a lot of healing until you all go in, right? And so you go in decisively once you get it set up. And then you have compositions like the Orisa, the Junkrat, the counter dive compositions like with McCree, where you have a lot of damage. So you don't want people to get on top of you, right? You don't want them, you want to like try and put out damage as early as possible and as much as possible. So in this matchup, we're going to talk about how the composition that the Valiant run is very strong at point pressure, but not strong at putting out damage. Whereas the Valiant, even though they're running GOATs, wants to play for poke. Now you're probably like, what composition could that be? We're going to talk about it. So we're going to change scenes here and we're going to discuss this match because this is an excellent example of Overwatch League level teams playing completely wrong. Completely wrong. So you think at this level they'd have everything figured out, but this is just a testament to the fact that there is so much more Overwatch to be learned in this game, that even the best at it still have so much to learn. So this is exciting. Okay, so we're going to talk about this composition because this is what we're looking at here. You have the Winston Zenyatta composition here, okay, versus the Moira Reaper composition. Now you're probably thinking, what? The Reaper's damage, right? You have a Reaper damage. Doesn't Valiant want to play this slowly? Now they have a DPS, but think about Reaper's range and how little damage he does until he gets on top of you, right? Even something like having a Reinhardt hard shield, which usually means that you do better in the poke war versus a Winston, isn't the case here, because what we have is we have the very important comparison right here. You have a Zenyatta versus a Moira, okay? And Zenyatta puts out significant more damage than Moira, especially at those mid to long ranges. So what the Vancouver Titans want to do is, unlike what you're kind of used to with playing GOATs into a deep composition that has a DPS, you don't want to force objective pressure. You want to put out as much damage as possible, softening up the Valiant as much as you possibly can before you do have to commit to point. And what the Valiant needs to do is they need to force a rotation because they know they don't have a Zenyatta, right? They're not going to be able to do much damage. They don't want the Ryan shield to get busted up and the Ryan to get abused before. They need to go straight to point with their Moira heal all in that tight, compact area and force the Titans to come to them. And when the Titans come to them and they have to, stop the point from being captured, bye bumper. you're running into a Reaper, and you're running into a Reinhardt as well, right? So that's where the Valiant strengths are, with the Moira heals, which the lack of damage but the strong healing, and with the Reaper, who obviously excels in close ranges but does terrible in long. So even though Titans is running what you'd normally think to be a composition that doesn't want to do a lot of damage at range, in this situation they do. So this is a very important kind of understanding that we have to look at here, because the Valiant don't make the same conclusion, don't draw the same conclusions that I did here. They think they need to chase down the Titans, which is a mistake, because they run into the teeth of the Zenyatta. The Winston just jumps away, and then they eventually just run out of resources and they get put in an awkward spot. And I also want to highlight on a brief side note how well Bumper plays this as well, because Bumper cannot jump to point. Bumper will just instantaneously die. That's the strength of the Moira Reaper composition, is if you force point pressure against a Winston Goats team, it's very difficult for them to contest point. That's the only way you should be playing Moira Reaper. The old economy in the long run is bad, because that means you have to swap your Moira to a Zenyatta, and then your Reaper has to go Diva once you capture the first point, because the enemy team will go Rhine Goats, and then Moira Reaper is not very good into Rhine Goats because of the hard shield. So when you have to make that swap, obviously you lose a little bit of your ult economy, but that's not as big of a deal if you quickly if you just quickly capture it, right, and you win decisively in that first fight, because then the enemy team, even though you have to make 2 swaps, is not going to be at a significant ult advantage, because you won the fight decisively, which means you get more ult charge. So this composition, if you do not win first fight with it, is very bad, and you should immediately swap if you don't win first fight. But Valiant plays it incorrectly, so unfortunate. So again, they've already scouted this, right? You need to go straight to point. You need to force the Winston onto point and then kill the Winston. You don't want to play against a long poke or against a team that has a Zenyatta, and you do not. This team will win. Even if they don't have a hard shield, they will win. Because at range, without the Zenyatta, the only thing that's even significant is a Zarya once she's build charge. Not even the Diva. You don't have a Diva that could put out any damage. Lucio with damage is irrelevant. You don't want to be using damage orbs. You don't, obviously, Fire Strike. What can you do with that? Reaper does terrible damage at range. Brig does no damage at range. So literally the only thing that you have is a high charge Zarya, which they have as well. And they have a Diva. And they have a Zenyatta. So you cannot play for poke here. You have to play for point pressure here. Very important to understand this. And honestly, in this situation, I would not force this rotation. You need to bully this Winston out. Like, you're not scared of this Winston getting a ton of cleave and, catching your Zenyatta if you're too slow to rotate it. You've got a Moira. That danger isn't there. You should have bullied this Moira. Like, immediately, the second he drops, light him up. You would immediately force his jump out. And unfortunately, Bumper builds up 62% ult charge. So this is where it happens really bad. So again, we've already decided that the Moira Reaper composition is very strong. It's like the old Slambulance comp, the quad tank. It's very strong in tight, close, tight spaces, right? You want to force point pressure. You need to force the Titans to go to point and then kill them. You don't want this sight line here, right? And you can't chase them down either, because they're just going to speed boost away, right? Eventually you'll catch them, but at what cost, right? That's the question you have to ask yourself. So right now, Valiant need to be going straight to point. Instead, they chase. They chase. Bumper gets a good amount of cleave there. Again, he's just looking to build Primal. And then there's the boot from Slime knocking them off. And so they're just opening themselves up. Now they're all over the place. And the team with the Diva and the team with the Discord is going to win. So they're all over the place. Now they do fall together, but it's too late. The damage has been done, quite literally. You've already got Twilight at 50%. You've got Bumper at 86%. And then this is where the really crucial thing is. When you play for point, you have to play stacked and tight, generally. And then you immediately, all-in-one, kill the most vulnerable target that tries to contest, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the tank, just whatever is the easiest to kill. So this is, I don't like this. I don't know what the plan is here. I don't know where the rest of the Valiant is right now. I don't know why we're not forcing point pressure. Not sure what we're waiting on. Okay, so this is absolutely delicious. Because let me tell you what this does right here from Bumper. Bumper drops like, oh, I'm going to contest point, right? But instead he jumps over to the outskirts. Now, what this does is this baits the Valiant to pursue some of them, not all of them. And it ends up splitting up the Titans composition. And when you are split up, again, the team with the Diva, with Matrix, right? The more mobile composition and the team with Discord and the better damage is going to punish you, right? So what do Valiant need to do here? They need to turtle up right here probably, and just bury into the wall. And the second anybody touches that they can reach, they kill. Instead, Bumper baits them, jumps away to bait them to follow, and they fall for the bait. Yep, he's feeling it. So now what we have here is we have some people chasing Bumper off, which is stupid. Absolutely stupid. Because you don't need to worry about anything except what's stopping you from getting point pressure when you're running a composition like this. You don't have the damage to pursue this. So you've got some people chasing this way. You've got Fate over here looking awkward, right? And now Fate pursues after that, right? So Fate's going after this, dealing with these targets, which he can't kill anyway. And now you've completely opened up the sight line for the Zenyatta to light them up from another angle. So we're establishing crossfire, right, with goats. We're not playing double sniper. This is a crossfire with goats. This is something that we don't see every day. So this is exciting. You can already start to see the Valiant's HP start to drop, right? You can see Twilight's already in 70%. Bumper has his primal, okay? No ticks have been taken because Valiant have not been turtling, right? Like Slime right here, he should be shield bashed and killed. But he's not because Valiant's out of position. So, and there it is. And there it is. Because everybody's spread out, we've got space over here dealing with Bumper. We've got everybody spread out and split, and no real objective pressure is being given here. Then they lose the fight. That's not how you force point pressure, right? You force point pressure by taking as little damage as possible, turtling, and then being very decisive, right? I'm not happy about them pursuing Bumper. But that would not have been the worst thing in the world if they had all committed to the pursuit. But instead, you get a confusion in comms, right? And confusion in not knowing what the win condition is, running at the enemy team, not bullying out the Winston. And so that you end up feeding a lot of ult charge and wearing yourself thin, lowering, reducing the amount of resources you have. And the only win condition that Moira Reaper has is that point pressure, right? That's the only thing that you can do. So when you don't play it properly, the Titans are going to be the superior comp. And remember what we said here. Because they're running Moira Reaper, if they do not win first fight, it's GG. So now we're spread out, we're split, and we still haven't forced a tick. So Bumper, like that's all they had to do. Right there. Right? It's too late now, but that's all they had to do. It doesn't have to be Bumper. It could be the Diva, it could be the Lucio, it could be the Brig. It's gonna be somebody. But sit on point, force them to contest close enough to where you can access, not Bumper running over there, and then delete them. That's it. That's all you had to do, and they didn't do it. And I don't know if it's coaching or just inexperience or execution, because a lot of times you could tell players what to do and they just forget. They don't know how to play it, right? They're not used to playing it, right? Players, these are 18-year-old kids, right? And just like with any other sport, it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice and a lot of training. Not everybody's got millions of like little catalogs and they can catalog every single win condition that coach said. But this is wrong. This is wrong from the very fundamental way that Valiant were playing. And they end up losing the fight. And for whatever reason, they stay on Moira Reaper. And this is a big mistake. Because at this point, you need to go Zen. You need to build up a Trance. You need to build up a Diva Bomb. And unfortunately, as we can see, this opens up. When they finally do switch off of the Moira Reaper, it's under a minute and a half. And does he even build up a Diva Bomb or a Trance? I think he might build a Trance. No, they don't. That's it. So there we have it. So let's pause and let's talk about this from like what can I actually learn from this? What can I apply from this? So again, poke versus point, right? Now, how this is applied is incredibly complicated. And it's impossible for me to do over this in like a 25-minute video. But what I can tell you to begin with is if you're playing as a team, with a team, or if you're a big shot caller in comp, maybe, you need to look at the compositions that the enemy team has and your team has, you need to go, the longer the fight goes in terms of like being indecisive, right? Like just kind of tickling each other, doing damage. What team is going to be better? And that should change how you play. If the enemy team is running a Rissa and a McCree and a Zenyatta and an Ana and a Hanzo, that's a lot of damage, right? That's a lot of healing, right? It's going to be, if you sit there and there's a hard shield, right? And if you sit there and you just poke against that composition, unless you've got like a Bastion or Rissa Diva, then you're not going to win that, right? It's not going to happen. So you need to find a way to A, force point pressure and force them to rotate, come onto you, and that's when you kill them, right? Or B, if you're running like a dive comp, like a Tracer or Genji, you need to force the play. And the play is, you can describe the play, there's different ways of how the play is executed, but the play is always something very quick and decisive that isn't slow, okay? Whereas if you look at a composition like, okay, they have they're running goats maybe, or they're running Reinhardt, Zarya, they're running like a Reaper and a Moira and a Lucio, sound familiar, right? And like a Diva, right? So that's a lot of tankiness, and you don't want them to get on top of you, right? And so you can either kite, but the easiest answer is, if you're playing like a Widowmaker Hanzo, is to get sight lines early and often and start putting damage out as soon as you can. Because you don't want that composition to either apply point pressure without taking any damage, or you don't want that composition to be able to quickly get on top of you, like executing a quick burst play. You need to put out damage early, and you need to put out damage often. You need to poke as much as you possibly can, right? As much as you possibly can. So once they do get to the point, or once they do get onto your tanks, that they're all half HP. You know, Zarya doesn't have any more bubbles, or Moira had to use her healing orb, or Lucio had to use amp. Like, you trade off those cooldowns. So yes, they're still better, but they're at a significant disadvantage, right? So whenever you play comp, whenever you scrim, look at your composition. Which composition does better with the raw damage output and those mid ranges, and which composition doesn't have that level of sustain, right? Doesn't have that amount of shields, doesn't have that amount of damage. And then if you are the composition with a higher damage, higher poke, set up poke lanes. Do it quickly, do it early, do it as much as you possibly can. Just like the Zenyatta comp we saw in the Winston Goats. And if you're the composition with the Reaper and the Moira, and you're like, we don't want to take those long fights, then you need to find a place, whether it's applying objective pressure, or whether it's finding a way to path, right, with cover, and get on top of them as fast as you can. You need to play to your strengths, whether it's poke or whether it's point. Very important concept, and that's about it. All right, so thanks you guys so much for watching this. This has been episode 2 of our first fight concepts, poke versus point. If you enjoyed it, feel free to shoot me a message and ask any additional questions that you may have. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next week.